Like we are streaming. Okay, I'd like to call this Town of Rochester Town Board special meeting to order. If you'd all stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm chairing and clerking the meeting tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and do the roll call. Councilwoman Alba, present. Councilwoman Smeeseth. Oh, Councilman Coleman.
Here.
And Supervisor Anowen is here. Absent is Councilman Zolliwin. And we also are joined by a few members of the public, but also we've invited representatives of all the boards and commissions that we recently did a referral to. So let me back up. The purpose of today's special meeting, which was called on Thursday so that the whole board could be present, is to review referral comments that we got back from all of our boards and commissions regarding the draft community preservation plan, which was drafted and put out into the public a year ago in 2024. That is part of a effort to have a community preservation plan and fund that would be funded by a real estate transfer tax. That part of it, the real estate transfer tax part, would be on sales, the portion of home sales over the median sale price. And that measure would be on the ballot. So there are 3 local laws in this effort. The first one, which establishes the fund, has already been passed. That happened last year. The middle one adopts a community preservation plan, which is what we're looking at tonight. And the final one is the real estate transfer tax. The board has been discussing limiting that to a 1% tax in the law that we put forth. So that would be something that we're considering in the next couple months, and there'll be a public hearing on that. If it passes by the board, that will be the measure that's on the ballot. So we did this referral. We have the community on our agendas. I've been posting public meeting materials, and we have in our projects folder is where the plan document is. So we've had that available publicly for a while. And it's a lengthy document, but it sets priorities for what we think of community and what we want to preserve as a community, and it sets the goals for what these funds would be used for. In 2024, the board sort of moved forward with a very short timeline to adopt these laws that could have been on the ballot last year. And we decided after after the public information sessions that we had and hearing from the public in this process, we wanted to slow it down because we heard a lot from the community and a lot from our boards and commissions that there were a few things that they wanted to see in the plan document. And since it's a community plan, we wanted to give the opportunity for those edits to happen. So the board referred the plan document to our boards and commissions, and we asked for input. And rather than us taking all of that input and just trying our best to incorporate it, we thought we wanted to invite representatives here to discuss and workshop how those edits could look. And I think we'll be scheduling some more working sessions, but right now this is the public, a public working session. So in a bit, I will circulate this notepad and have everyone who's participating currently sign in. The public doesn't have to, but you may. So that way I can put this in the minutes. I'll put who's participating in the meeting in our meeting minutes. But first, we thought it was also important that we put a public comment in this agenda. We've been doing that at all of our meetings, and so I have that available right now. And then kind of depending on how we'll do after we hear from the public, we'll go around, do some brief intros and synthesis of the feedback that the committee you're representing has. And then we'll either workshop together or we might do some breakout, just kind of depending on what comes up in that circle. And so I also feel like I want to keep good order, but I feel like if members of the public have questions, I'm not opposed to having more participation because there's more of us at the table than there is public. So the other thing I want to say is this is a larger participatory meeting than we usually have. And everyone is here representing an interest that isn't necessarily we don't necessarily see them as they're all part of our community, but it's possible to see some interests as competing. So when we're in a setting like that, I think it's really difficult to not have conflict, right? So I just want us to all be aware that there could potentially be some conflict in this discussion, but what we want to do is treat that respectfully, and also honor the conflict, because conflict is an opportunity for us to make resolutions. It's an opportunity for us to make something that could represent multiple interests. So I would like us to all hold that everyone has an opportunity to speak. We let everyone share their ideas. There are no, it's okay to get it out there, and it's okay to let someone say something that we might not necessarily agree with. I will be holding all of that, and the rest of the board members will be holding that. And anything that we can't find a resolution to tonight, we can just make sure that we note it, and we will work to find a resolution to that. If at any point it gets beyond what I think is appropriate, I will call a break. I'm just preparing, just because this is a big group. I have faith in all of you that we're going to have a productive, good conversation. I think that's about it. I'll be keeping an eye on the time, and I think at the end we'll either, I think our work product that we want out of this meeting, number one, is what's the reason, what are the goals that we have for looking at this document and including these ideas. So I think getting on the same page about that. If I know some people came here with really specific suggestions for edits, I think that's really great. So if we have that, I think we should definitely make sure that those are captured. I will be acting as a facilitator, and because I tend to be the one that holds our records, I'm going to do my best to be taking notes. So that might mean that I'm not the one necessarily, talking as much, which I think is fine. I might need to ask that we pause, or I might need to ask that someone repeat something just so I can make sure that that idea, concept, sentence is captured. So with that, I would like to go ahead and open our public comment portion of the meeting. We typically, this is typically at our business meeting, so we don't like to have debate or discussion back and forth during the public comment, but I do feel like any questions that come up, if we have any, we should make sure that we address them either directly after public comment, or know that I'll try to address any questions throughout this meeting or discussion. So are there any members of the public?
We can
Oh.
also just speak about like what this document is and how it relates to the CPP, and I'm happy to clarify that for people who may not.
Sure, yeah, you wanna just say something before we,
Yeah, so the document we're looking at for those, I assume everybody's read it, came out of a committee that did a tremendous amount of work in a short amount of time. The purpose of this document is to be a guiding document for a future advisory board that would evaluate properties for potential inclusion in this process for the town to potentially look at for preservation. I think the key things to emphasize for me is that this is kind of a guiding document. We have a lot of those in town. We have a comprehensive plan. We have the historic preservation plan. We have a number of other plans that focus on priorities for the town. So I think we need to think about that when we're looking at this document, is this is something that will live forward in time and future members of the community may look at and use for guidance. So it's important to make sure that we're representing the concerns of the town as much as possible. I think the other important thing about this document is it's a living document. There's a requirement that it be reviewed and updated every 5 years. But there's no limit to how frequently it can be. So if a year from now, we realize we made a mistake or didn't include something or want to clarify something, this board and future boards can come back and make further revisions and evaluate what was produced in this document and update it. So this is not the final say in this. This is not something that's going to be done and never looked at again. So I think that's an important thing to consider as we move forward.
great, thank you. And also, we haven't scheduled the public hearing on this yet, so we're trying to make these edits together, then there'll be public hearings, so there'll be additional opportunities to hear from the public about this. So with that, I'll open the public comment portion of the meeting. Are there any members of the public here who'd like to address us at this time? Yes.
Gerald DeWitt, the funding you get from this tax now, is that up to the town how to spend it? Is it only for the purchase of property that the town deems necessary to preserve for the beauty or agricultural purposes? So is it only gonna be used to purchase property? Or can the
No.
funding be used, let's say, to help a farmer pay taxes?
So,
Because, if you help the farmer pay taxes, are you not kind of, in a sense, keeping the land, preserving the land, you know, for not to be developed and everything? Because we do give tax breaks to big corporations like Ennis, not to name one. But yet the farms that have been here for how many years, you know, you're gonna say, okay, you get an ag assessment. Well, I do have an ag assessment, but every year my taxes just keep going up and up and up and up. In the ag assessment, the proportion of what my taxes keep going up, you know, is not keeping pace. So I was just wondering if the town can use the funding in other ways besides just the purchasing of land. And if they do purchase the land, then who is responsible for the maintenance on the land? You know, if you, let's say, do purchase a farm, are you gonna mow the fields or keep the fields in such a way that they don't grow up into, you know, forest or something?
so the one thing that I can share, and I think answering these questions can be helpful for our discussion here too. The enabling legislation that allows us to do this was passed by the New York State Legislature, which allows towns in Ulster County, Westchester County, and a third county, Orange County, to do this. In that legislation, it limits how we can use the funding to purchase of property, purchase of development rights, and then up to 10% of the fund can be used for maintenance. So we would not be able to use this specific fund for what you have just put forward. But I also think that this would not be the only tool we would want to use. And I think some of the ideas about relief to farmers are things that we should consider. And we should continue to think about ways to assist.
So that would have to be something done through the legislative enact.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think a few other points. So one, any future activities done through this fund are done as their local laws, individual local laws. I know they go through public hearing, so if before the town can do anything, there's a public hearing, there's a chance for people to weigh in. You can purchase development rights, which would not be an actual transfer of the property, so. If someone can build 50 houses on their lot, but they want to keep it in farm use. The fund could be used to buy those development rights so that it could continue to remain in agricultural use. And I had another point. I don't know if it was the use of the property, but does the town maintain that in perpetuity? No, the town could buy a parcel or the rights and then transfer that to another organization that is going to use it for supporting agricultural uses or open space. So the town could just be a pass-through to actually do the acquisition and then transfer ownership or the rights to another organization. So it's not that the town is going to have to be responsible for that forever.
Also clarify how much money we anticipate this fund is going to generate annually. It's going to be, what do we say, 100 and.
I think given the thinking about it being 1%, again, it's based on the market. So we were thinking between $100,000 and $200,000 a year from the tax itself, though the fund can receive other.
That's at current market.
Yeah.
Craziness.
And then in terms of I know basically any future board, you have to have a willing seller and a willing buyer. So the seller has to want to offer something.
Right.
And typically the way we see the helping farmers is with the purchase of development rights, because getting that isn't a guarantee if you want to keep your farm in farming. It's not necessarily a guarantee that a land trust or other organization would offer you any money for your development rights. So this is something that allows the town to help give that monetary value to a farmer that might not otherwise get it, and also preserve their land. And then they would have, they'd have to develop that, and the agricultural easement language that would allow all types of agricultural activities to occur. And that would be really important to ensure that that happened. But that's, to me, the biggest benefit I see is not for the town to run farms, but for the town to offer that, give someone the ability to get a market rate in their own lifetime, but maintain the control and then the sale of their product after them.
I'm all for the selling of developmental rights, but I look at a longer term thing is that's a one-shot deal that family farm gets.
Yes.
Why, if you did something with the taxes, that can be 20, 30 years, longer down the road. Because let's face it, when usually a farmer sells the developmental rights, most of that money is already used up to pay off old debt.
Yeah.
So that farmer may just clean up his debt, but still be starting from ground zero the next year. So, I mean, like I said, don't get me wrong, we sold developmental rights on our farm, which cleared up a lot of our debt. But at the same time, it's like, my daughter wants to come back now and take the farm over, so there's another generation where if something was done to, and our biggest thing really is taxes. I mean, school taxes, the way we fund it is antiquated.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be based on land, but I know that's getting off the subject. But I do agree with you that we need to do something if we want to stay a viable community where people want to come to. Because it's beautiful. Let's face it, we take it for granted. I've traveled all over the world. And we take it for granted, but when you go out and you come back, you're like, wow, this is really one of the, most beautiful valleys in the world. So.
Thank you. we really appreciate your questions and your feedback. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Okay, so I'll go ahead and close that comment portion of the meeting. And we'll just start opening up to the discussion of the feedback we've received from the committee. So I think we have multiple members of some of the committees. So what I thought we could do is go around, introduce ourselves, and then if it's possible to have if there's multiple members, if one person could summarize for everyone else here what their input is. We scheduled this really short, so I didn't have time to circulate the comments to everyone. So I thought that would give us a chance to hear what the feedback from all the committees is, and then I have some copies of everything if anyone wants a printout of it. So we'll just start here with our Housing Advisory Committee representatives.
Hi, I'm Claire Wasser from the Housing Committee. We did write a letter to the board regarding this. I don't know if you wanted to speak about it.
Basically, so the Housing Advisory Committee was established by the town board to help advance accessible housing at all different income levels throughout the town. And that was the purpose. And then with the community preservation plan, we just wanted to make sure that in advancing the preservation goals, which we all support, right? We agree with that it's a beautiful area and nobody wants to do away with that. But at the same time, there's been a long recognized need for more housing in our community so that people like your daughter and other people, my daughters, could live here if they wanted to. And so the gist of our comments is that in developing this plan, there ought to be vehicles in which the impact on housing availability can be considered as a factor. It doesn't mean that in every preservation effort, you're going to have a parallel, multifamily housing development on it. It's just something that should be in the frame as you go on advancing the preservation goals. Are there ways in which, like they're doing in other communities, they're preserving some land and setting some aside for housing? They don't have to be in conflict. They can be pursued together. And we just thought if there were a way of building it into the document itself, so that as the envisioned advisory group, the Community Preservation Advisory Board, is considering various ways in which the town taxpayer dollars could be spent, there could be a piece of that discussion that is there an opportunity here to advance housing goals simultaneously? And I would suspect that in some cases it'll be irrelevant, it won't even be in the picture. But in other cases, it may be. So that's the thrust of our suggestion.
I'm Alana. I also would like to point out that there is a lot of overlap between the maps that were presented in the document with our consultant housing sites inventory maps. So that is something to keep an eye on. Not all of them, but I would say three of the maps included in the document there's a lot of. Thank you.
My name is Hans. I'm on the Climate Smart Team Lead. We didn't have a lot to say about the CPP documents, just that the executive summary has one sentence about climate change. And we think that could be improved on.
Deb Medenbach, I'm the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. I sent you a note that just sort of had some basic edits in it, like how many historic properties are being considered. Our survey has 500 plus. There's another mention of 1,000. So just knowing where those numbers are drawn from. Also, it pointed out to me that there's a communication flow gap between the building inspector's office and the planning board to our committee, so that we're not a bonded commission. We are just advisory. We give historic information for people so that they can make informed choices. So, so cleaning up that gap was another thing that we saw. We support this idea. I think it's terrific to provide an opportunity for people to make this, to preserve houses, buildings that may otherwise be lost. Everything will be lost eventually, but keeping precious things as long as we can is really helpful. Anything else, Wilson and Joe?
I'm also with the Historic Preservation Commission. This offers a little bit of hope. I think some of I think about the culture when you talk about community preservation, which is in the document. It's really a kind of cultural preservation, not that you can preserve culture, but you can hold on to the meat of the culture, which here I do think is farming. I think if we lose that, I think if development gets too big of upper hand, this won't be the same place as Westchester. I think that would be a real shame. I think anything we can do to make farmland available to young farmers who are coming in and can't afford to farm because of the cost of land would be good. So to me, in terms of the preservation of our culture, that would do a lot. And also that people who have been farming here a long time, I hear the thing about taxes and can afford to farm here. The taxes aren't based on what was here 50 years ago. They're based on what's happening and what's starting to develop. And we need to have another look at that if we want to keep the culture of this place alive. Thank you.
I'm Joan Ewing, also Historic Preservation, and I'm here to listen.
I'm Henry Rich, ECC. Mostly I've just in awe of the amount of work that's gone into this document. Just want to thank everybody who's worked on it. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure always to develop land for whatever reason. And yeah, the ECC is just very much in favor of our mission of conservation for all the reasons spelled out in this document.
Peter Nelson, is the chair of the planning board and is also the chair of the ad hoc committee. Did the community preservation plan draft last year along with Christie, and but I'm here tonight. I guess as representative of the planning board, since that committee is no longer together, and the planning board is unanimous in consent agreeing for this proposal to accept the plan. And the mission, the goals of the plan that we all worked on last year are important ones that we see in the planning board regularly, like, agriculture and farming is something that we're super interested in protecting. It is the core of historic preservation, and housing is an important thing too. That's what we are really working for. One thing that has come up in my time on the planning board over and over again is water. And water is an important part of this plan, preserving, water rights, clean water. And it's important to every one of the other issues. It's essential for farming, it's essential for restaurants, it's essential for housing. We don't have public water here, so we rely upon wells. And we see this more and more with applications coming up in front of the planning board, is the essential nature and sort of questionable diminishing supply in some places of water. And so that's something that, we would like to, so I guess all the elements are important, but that's one that has come up a little bit more recently, so.
Christie, before, on the ECC, I'm also was on the ad hoc committee that worked on the 108-page document, and I don't have any changes from the ECC as Henry said, but if I just also say with my work hat on, the executive director of the Walker Valley Land Trust, what I've seen this community preservation fund do in New Fulton Garden has been really transformative, and opening the doors, talking to a lot of farmers and coming up with some creative ways that we can get people on the land, continue to work the land, and not make it into Westchester, which is my favorite.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What do you mean?
Absolutely. So it's farmers that as mentioned earlier, who really want to keep their farm, live in farming, and they have younger generations. So Talio Barrow is a great example. That property is prime for development because it's got water, it's flat, it's already cleared, it's right on the scenic view shed. It was planned to have a 19-house subdivision. So we were able to do a purchase of development rights, pay the family, they were able to pay off mortgage, invest in the farm. Now his daughter is taking over the farm and doing really well with it. It doesn't address the long-term issues of taxes, absolutely. But I've seen in my 16 years, chances for the farmers to really be able to take care of their property. It still doesn't address the issue of farm worker housing and other aspects, but Taliaferro does allow for that on the property. So it's not a perfect solution, but I think it's really a wonderful one for farmland property that's so easy to be transformed. Thanks.
Hi, I'm John Kelder, with Kelder's Farm. I represent the Ag Committee. I'm also Colleen's here too. She's on our committee as well. I guess our main concerns are keeping, this is a very agriculture community history. And there's lots of old farms, there's lots of new farms, which is really exciting. And we just want to make sure that continues into the future. And, I guess some of those points, I guess I'm concerned about are, just not having farmland be competition with parks. There's other towns that have had farmland, great farmland become walking trails and stuff like that, which is great to a point. But at what point are we losing farmland? We're losing housing space for people that need to live here. And then also we're losing stuff off the tax roll. So I think that's something to think about when if a town's buying farmland, you could be losing tax dollars. So that's something to think about, and potentially somewhere for somebody to live. Some of the other things in my family's been here for a long time, it's just making it not challenging for families to transfer to the next generation and keeping that something that is allowed, and then allowing for new farmers also to continue to have land and farms.
Can I just add real quick as an unofficial member? Another point that we had all kind of come to on the Ag Committee was that, farms, they include most of the things that are important in this proposed plan. I mean, water, we stated, is very important to farms. We have water. We are the scenic view. We have the open fields. We have the forest with all the ecology, and we make food. No farms, no food. So I think it's obviously you can see where water would be top priority, but again, right, like over parks or walking trails or scenic beauty, it's like, since it encompasses everything, just as something to consider how important they are, because once they're gone, once you put water lines in and electric lines and foundations, there's no going back. I mean, that's a hard turnaround.
And you are an official member.
Not at the table.
You can sit at the table.
Dave Roberts from the planning board, and Peter summarised, the planning board's the position on this. I just wanted to piggyback on one item, which was with regard to water. The question was whether there might be funds or monies available from the fund for studies to better understand areas where there are shortages of water, and then maybe adjusting zoning in response to that, or whatever the solutions are. But that would be another use for funds.
Hans Fitzgerald, I'm also a member of the planning board. I completely agree with my colleagues said here. On a personal level, I completely support this effort. Because I think there's tremendous population pressure here and we need to do everything to keep it under control and to keep it like it is and allow farming. And but also allow small businesses to develop here.
Sure. And just add one thing, just as a matter of full disclosure, Hans and I are also board members of the Ronda de Sopas Land Conservancy, which I neglected to mention, so I just want to put that out there, so.
Switch your hats
That- You can call that here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great, thank you, everyone. So I heard a lot there and, I think just. So what I wanted to do is, start to think about what are the parts of the plan that might not, what are the opportunities in the current document that could reflect some of these ideas, like if some of the input that we got is like one very concrete suggestion is we want to make it clear that farmland should not be in competition with parkland. And like, do we all agree with that? I mean, I think that sounds like a good idea. So something like that, I guess. Yes, Peter.
I agree with that in principle, but I think that there are situations where you have land that is less desirable for farming that would be good parkland,
Right.
just to make distinction there. Yeah, agriculture, if you have a beautiful, field that's been used for agriculture, I'd say maybe not the best thing to do to create a park in it. But if you had something that's more wooded or less desirable as farmland, then maybe something like that could have other opportunities. I know with the Cooking Imp Farm in Red Hook, they had some less desirable stuff, and they're able to separate out a portion and use that for affordable housing.
Yes,
For
yeah.
instance, so I think that there are opportunities. I don't think a blanket parkland versus farmland is, I think each property has to be considered individually, and there's a lot of opportunities for discussion there and needs. And discussion about what it is, where it is, and how it's used. So.
Yeah.
And there's also, you don't have to buy it to turn it into somewhat of parkland. There's the right to roam in England where, you just have, you have the turnstile so people can come and walk the edge of your field in peace and, and be gone. And they don't own it, they're just taking a stroll. And that seems to, you don't have to own it.
I just wanted to piggyback on just for that you can, yes, there have been like 2 cases where people have subdivided properties that were identified in community preservation plans in their town. But in order to have affordable housing built, we also have to have the funding or have some sort of incentive for developers to come here to build affordable housing and have a price point for it. So I just, it was a good point for me to chime in about that. Housing transfer tax is also something that we're looking towards, and that's just equally as important as this one. So I love that we're referencing housing, but just know that we also need to have some type of resource to support that as the goal too. If this passes, but that doesn't, then the horse is before the cart, as they say, and we won't be able to do much because we have no affordable housing developers that are willing to come to our town. So from our lack of English. Yeah.
Go ahead. Are you gonna be I'm just understanding the process, are you gonna be going through the document like page by page of anything?
You mean tonight?
Or whatever.
So, I think definitely we'll be reviewing it. What I wanted to do, and I don't know the level, I guess at this point, it depends on the level of preparation that we have. I could just ask a general question to the group to say, are there specific parts of the document that you identified that you think should be edited?
I see things that could be edited.
Okay, do you want to share those?
Well, like, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna, like, it's a 106-page document, but even on, I had a question about on the first page, why was it saying, this is a question. That farms in perpetuity can lead to savings on future school taxes. Is that like based on anything? I said very suppositional. So I just wondered about that.
Yeah, I don't,
Firstly.
it's not cited either, right? There's no.
Yeah, so I just wondered about
Yeah,
that.
I was curious.
It sounded like an
Do we know where that came
advertisement
from?
or something.
I don't know.
I had a question, Peter, I think you're, well, a couple of people here are more familiar with the plan document than the rest of us. But did I understand it that there was envisioned like a scoring system of sorts?
Yeah.
Where, so to me anyway, that's something where you could, taking, for example, John's suggestion about not having farms compete with parks.
Right.
So that could be built into the scoring system. Or it could be a yes, no, almost like we do on a SEQR review.
Yeah.
Like, would this purchase of development rights or establishment of a park interfere with agricultural use? Yes, no. And that way, you know, you can't guarantee perfect outcomes.
Right.
But the idea is to build better processes so you don't look back later on and say, oh, you should have thought of that. That's just one suggestion in general as a way of framing, if there are edits to be made. And maybe you could even explain to us, Peter, what the original vision or the vision is in the plan for how things are scored.
Yeah, you know, by law, I believe every property in the town has to be identified. Or in the town as to be part of the document, be identified, and then there is a score given for help me out.
We use 7 different attributes from
Yeah.
water sources,
Right.
scenic view. And so what the other towns have done that have adopted this is this then provides you with, and it's a living document, provides you with information of what are the highest ranked properties that are the most important to protect just to start off, because otherwise we've got the entire town, we have all these parcels. So this kind of points out what has scenic views, watershed, all of these really important attributes that's the most valuable to protect. And once we start working down through that list, then you move down, and ideally one day we run out of property to protect and everything's perfect, yay. But that ranking system is supposed to be very fluid because first of all, we've got willing landowners, there's a lot of attributes in there. And then also taking this then to the public comment, it's not like the committee just decides. But they do have to have some reasoning as to why they picked. It's not like, oh, I love Kelders because I have my one punch pass, because I do. And so I want them to, you know, it's a more open and transparent, I guess, in that way. Decision-making process to get it.
So when our committee, again, the Historic Preservation Commission identifies properties that hadn't been on the survey yet. Does your committee then decide whether that's valid or not, or you know, does it automatically get added in, or does an advisory committee keep properties to it?
So you can speak to this. Our committee that created it doesn't exist anymore. So
Yeah.
we did it. There you go. Go there and got it as class.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's as Councilman Coleman stated, it's an ongoing thing. So is this document perfect? Absolutely not. You know, are there things that could be added to it? Yeah, climate change, I would agree with what Hank said there. You know, and so if there are things that are missed from historic preservation, like we, you know, a good example was identifying Native American sites.
Right.
And that had to be done very discreetly without identifying where sites were, but also getting that information from experts in that. And so that's something that I worked on with, you know, local people that were Lenape people that have knowledge of that, and added those in. Did I get them all? Absolutely not. And that's an ongoing thing. So that's part of the reason why the document is fluid and needs to be updated, so those things can be added. So if we miss the historic thing, that could be added and changed as a score. And it's a, you know, to me, the beauty of this document is that it's a very fluid thing, you know, that you can use it for outright purchase of land, which I think is probably the least attractive idea because it incurs cost to the town to maintain it, you know, and it takes it off the tax. So I think the property development rights are a more interesting thing, or access for a rail trail or canoe launch or protect a water source or something like that. I think those are, for me personally, those are much more interesting options rather than, you know, adding to the town's budget and tax burden and maintenance burden. So it's a totally a living thing, and the idea of having the score was to just, it's a roadmap. And if you choose to go this way or that way, it's an option, and the, you know, committee, the Community Preservation Committee that is, will be appointed by the town. Those people will in concert review all those attributes. If somebody came and said, I'm interested in, you know, offering this piece of property for sale to the town for the community preservation, they could, the committee would look at it and see how it fits in the score, and then also in their discussion, and then they would have to go to the town board and say, we're interested in this property as opposed to that property, and this is why. And then they'd have a public hearing for the entire town to weigh in on it before they make that decision. So there's a lot of checks and balances in the system to make sure that it's done fairly and also open, you know, so.
And we do have a lot of the town covered in the maps, and my understanding is that's by design, because if it's not identified in the document, it's not eligible.
Exactly, until it's updated.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, that was a point that I wanted to make, is that we are not required to identify every property in town. We're required to identify any parcel in the plan document that nothing could be purchased if it's not in the plan document. So something can't be purchased if it's not named in the plan document.
Right.
So in ours, it's every parcel is ranked to leave it really open. But another point of feedback we got is like that the public wanted to see a little bit more direction because of the idea that like we'd be buying all these properties and taking them off the tax roll. And I know we as a board don't really want to do that. I have too much to do. I don't want to.
Any municipality is trying to own more land.
Except maybe Marltown.
Well,
It's public.
It's fire.
It's totally public. Controversial, so.
Yeah, the man who mows those fields loves it. He loves his job.
But
You guys know Jeremiah does, who loves mowing the fields.
We went, when we were devising the community preservation plan, we went to great efforts to include every property that we could, you know, because of that reason that it had to be in the plan in order to be considered. And it's important to note that the scoring, the ranking is not a value of one property is worth more than another. It's just it follows, as Christie said, it follows those attributes that were, you know, outlined in the plan, the 7 attributes that we identified. So.
And it was
Not
not,
qualitative.
it was not done parcel by parcel, right? You used GIS tools and they did like what maps overlap, like bat spawning grounds with waterways and things like that.
Yeah.
right, and the consultant that helped with that have done it in Red Hook and multiple other towns, I think, he worked in 8 towns, so that, you know, there's kind of a template of how this is done, you bring in all these maps, kind of. So a lot of the plan, you know, not every single word of this was written, it's kind of, we took all these amazing attributes that we have in our town and popped it into the plan, into this template, and it really highlighted, we talked about this at the ad hoc committee, the water resources alone, that we have a very unique situation here in town of Rochester that really need to be protected.
But it was not, I like Peter, I'm gonna give his property a 12.
Correct.
I don't like Michael, he's a.
We love everybody.
It was blind and everywhere.
Yes.
I do think, getting back to what Claire was saying, it might be useful to talk about process. We're not decided on a process, but we have this document. Go line by line, we can make edits as a group, we can look at sections, we can talk high level about, you know, the concepts that we, like, there were things when I was reading this, I was like, oh, I don't agree with the structure of that. It's a great document, but you know. So I don't know what people in this group want to do, but I don't think we have a strong opinion. If we want to go in specific sections or say, let's really focus on the sections that mention farming, we can do that. We could get feedback afterwards, but I think ultimately what the board is gonna wanna do is go through and make these edits page by page and see what we can change.
Yeah, and I think that's why I was opening it up to, I know we had, the Housing Advisory Committee and the Agricultural Advisory Committee made specific recommendations. So I think that's what I was sort of, how many among us have some specific recommendations that we could put forward? And I think that kind of rolling those around in the group could be productive. But also I think this discussion is actually really productive to talk about these concepts. So I can share, or I have the referral comments. We also had an interesting comment from a member of the public that they felt like Veterans Park was represented. The description of it in the document is not the same as what our park is. So that's like one really kind of, the other thing that I have, this is like a boring one, but we've changed our zoning since this was drafted. So I'd like to update the numbering, and there's some details that we should probably clean up.
Also, I don't think the Mountain House is in town.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, the Mount
It
Mohawk.
mentions that the Mohawk Mountain House is.
Preserve it.
As a
Yeah.
preserve.
But it mentions
Yeah, the house
The house
specifically
itself.
I had.
mentions the hotel.
Is that's in.
We're not getting any of those taxes. I have a thing
Oh, that you want to bring up?
that I would like to see.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
don't, I don't think there should be any mention of property value in this document. Property value, I think if it's incidental to the preservation of parcels, that's great, but I think, to me, there's a fundamental tension in this document, which is between, the different priorities that the town has: housing, preservation of agricultural land, preservation of open spaces, and I think property value is great if you own property, but high property values make it hard to buy land to farm. They make it hard to buy land to build housing on. I think the other issue we have to deal with is that there's overlap in some of these areas. So some of the best farmland is also along 209, which is most convenient to have denser development because you have access to emergency services, access to public transport. So
Public infrastructure.
right, so I think one thing I would like to see this group try to come up with is ways in which, because I think this is a goal that this group has, to balance those things, to not prioritize open space over farmland, or farmland, as John mentioning, farmland over housing, to find ways in which we can leverage this specific tool to get all of those things. We want it all. We want more housing for local workers. We want farmland preserved. We want open space. How do we do all of those things? And how do we make this a guiding document that the committees and future boards can say, oh, that's what people are thinking. Put together.
So I think that's a good question then. How do we, and again, this is like, we want you to share your ideas. How can we deal with overlapping priorities in this document?
Cluster development.
I'm sorry, you spoke very softly, but
Cluster development.
cluster development, yes, sure.
So put that in as
Well,
a,
I mean, it's mentioned, I think, a couple of times, but it could be elaborated upon.
Also, a lot of those properties along 209 that you talk about already have development rights purchased. Back in the early 90s, I think they did that, so. People like the Kelder's farm can put their barns and things like that, agricultural buildings can go there and things, but those beautiful viewscapes that we treasure, those are not going to be, little houses, so.
A lot of times that has some of the best soil, along the riverbank.
Right.
So I wonder if something, maybe not property values for sure, that maybe considering, a worthwhile inclusion would be soil types.
Right, which are easy to access on the parcel viewer.
And I think that was one of the criteria. I think that was one of the
Yeah.
data sets they used, so yeah.
That's a question.
Yep.
So this document has a lot, you know, as stuff for farms, for water, historic preservation, for biodiversity. I agree with Hank, there could be maybe something about climate, but it's, you know, fundamentally a document about conservation. There's even stuff about job creation. If you add housing, this is kind of just a summary of the comprehensive plan. Is that sort of where this is heading, or should this remain kind of a conservation document, which is to say parcels that the town wouldn't want to be developed or would want to be specifically conserved? Not that it can't say anything about housing, but if it's trying to promote housing, there's a lot that's trying to promote housing aside from just, you know, developers, but also the state is shutting towns out of you know, $600 million in state grants unless they become a pro-housing community. So there's a lot of pressure already in that direction. Is the intent not to find, you know, let's say $100,000-$200,000 a year of all the parcels that the town board would decide are the least appropriate for development, and the most important to conserve the water or scenic view or future generations or climate change, however you want to think about it, or is, because once you put housing as it is sort of a summary of the overall plan, which does balance literally everything.
So I can answer a little bit. I'm also happy to open it up for more answers. Part of what when we were in the very genesis of this process, we've been in a housing crisis for 30 years. It has reached peak. And I think this process to create a community preservation plan is something that we are able to do, and it's a tool that can be really useful. And so the board acted on it. We didn't have anything that would allow us to do this for housing, although it looks like we might next year. So we want to make sure that whatever it is we're putting out there for community preservation is inclusive of our needs to have how to not conflict with our town comprehensive plan, that our community, quote unquote, remains an affordable place to live, but we have gotten an F on that. So I think that's where we want to see this document address, that we want to make sure that we acknowledge that is a goal, even if we can't use the funds specifically for that. So it should be very reflective. And I think especially for the ways that we have framed it of worker housing, farm worker housing, housing for, like, to think of it as community preservation and not conservation. I think that's how we're thinking of the plan document, even if the way we use the tool itself is pretty specific. Does that answer your question?
It does.
And then if anyone else wants to.
Well, I don't think those two things are always mutually exclusive. You can imagine a portion of land that is, you know, really good for farming. You know, 90% of it's good for farming, but part of it is not and could be developed for housing. And possibly that housing component helps to be, you know, subdivided, sold off, and fund the balance or whatever, you know, whatever the story is. But yeah, I think, and so in that sense, that becomes an attribute, that larger parcel of land.
Right.
So I think for that reason, I think it's important to keep housing part of the language, because once again, it's looking at the total picture, not just.
What about conservation subdivision? That's on your comprehensive plan. And
That's allowed in the
so
zone.
we're talking about more density than what the 1 acre zoning, which the town seems to want to keep. At least they did when I was working on CRC years ago. I was thinking, well, what about more density in housing that's less expensive? And some kind of water system.
so that it becomes feasible. Then that opens up the land for farmland, it opens up the land for forest. It opens up the land for working land. And then the housing's even better, because there's better adjacency in terms of people in relationship to other people. People are less isolated. You know, that's gonna be a big issue coming up, because we're in a very isolated period in terms of people's psychology right now. We need to start looking at other ways to build housing other than taking gobs of land up, which are being taken away from farmland and from forest and the nature which we all want. If you think of the beautiful villages in Europe, they're on very small pieces of land and they're open to farmland all around.
So that relates to what Alana was sharing about just cluster development, which is another way of thinking about conservation subdivision. Did you have something else? to
Yeah,
add?
I just was curious, I don't know if you guys have asked your attorneys and I think or whoever yet, but what is the language about subdivision in the document? Like how critical is fleshing that out in this document for an application that comes before the town, or not an application, but if there's a property owner who has interest in, you know, it's gonna be rare, the property owner that wants to conserve and also maybe parcel out housing, whether for their heirs, for their workers, or for development. So my biggest concern is if this is codified, then there's no mention of what the sequence needs to be. As a committee, we spoke to Mayor McCowan of Red Hook, and he mentioned that the Cookingham Farm project specifically was pre-subdivided before the town acquired the land, and it is related to a very specific family dynamics of that farm. And he was very like confluence of very specific factors that led to that project, which is great. It sounds like a great project, but seems like very specific and not replicatable necessarily any place.
So.
No, so I just, yeah, so that's one.
Yeah, what? So one of this thing this document does is it calls out other tools available to towns. Section 3 kind of goes through, and I think your point's important because this is not local law. This is a guiding document, but really what you're asking for is, do we need to look at some of those other tools referenced in the document, like our subdivision code, to say, okay, maybe we need to update the subdivision code to align with this process here. And I think that's something that's good for us to think about as a group as well, not for this specific project, but if there are examples like that, hey, let's do this now, but let's also look at subdivision because we need a mechanism for if the town's going to buy rights or do this to make it easier or allow for greater density like Logan's talking about. Or I don't even know if we could buy a parcel and use it as a water tower and then provide, water resources for the hamlets. Could be interesting, but yeah, I think that's something else we need to do as a group is kind of think about, okay, should we reference something in this document and say, the town should go back and revisit its subdivision code or leverage the subdivision code to be able to enable X, Y, and Z. I think that's a good point.
So back to the original questions points with separating if this is just gonna become, if we add housing to it, another comprehensive.
Can you speak up, please?
Sorry, to the original point that if we add housing into this document, more housing into it, that it'd be like the comprehensive plan. Housing isn't, the few times of housing, I just want to be clear, the few times housing is mentioned in this document, it's in definitions. It's not specifically stating anything that's overbearing on housing, it's not saying intent on housing or anything like that, or blocking of development or not, or of housing specifically or not, so it's only mentioned 3 out of 18 times, non-defined, not outside quotated definitions, just so you guys know, but I don't disagree with all these points. I think that these are all great. I love the idea of cluster housing. To Michael's point, there are possibilities for us to, maintain septic and water systems for a development that someone else builds in the town. Sign, contracting agreements that we're the ones who are the, managers of the water systems or septic systems, things like that. So that is a possibility to do, but that is like the biggest. That's the biggest deterrent and struggle in our town for housing is that there is no water or septic municipally. It's almost impossible to get a housing developer to listen to us when it comes to those things, so. But yeah, I think that they are separate things, housing and our conservation. As Erin stated, we've been in a housing crisis for over 30 years in general in this area, and it's kind of ballooned now over the past few. But I just also wanted to say I agree with Michael's points. I think that this is important, but we need to make sure that there's our intent is clear between all three of these.
And if I just want to answer your question, Alana, about how important or what's the weight of talking about housing and subdivision specifically. One possible solution that we could do, what I heard you saying, and I agree, is we could either add language or make an appendices that talks about exactly what you're saying, like a model of like, because conservation subdivision is mentioned and we allow it, but to vision what that could look like could be an interesting, appendix that we could cite in those sections that talk about housing, like here's how you could do it. And I think that could be a solution that wouldn't require editing of the so much editing of the document, but adding a tool reference guide that I think is possible to do.
Or do we want to say future committees should prioritize parcels that enable subdivision or separating out mixed use agricultural uses with denser housing and conservation subdivisions to kind of tell future committees what we're thinking.
Or do both.
Or do both.
I don't know if it could happen, but I was just wondering if like that quality of a piece of property that could be considered as one of the attributes, like a piece of property that is ripe for that kind of subdivision that has qualities of an area could be developed as a cluster.
Yes,
Yeah, I personally would like to go over the scoring table, not obviously not with everyone here. I don't want you guys all night and compare it to our scoring table that we've received from the Housing Advisory Committee with our consultants there that have done the 8 areas of town, right? It was 8 corridors in total. That did a generic overview of corridors, but then to corridor specific parcel individual analyses. However you're supposed to say that clearly. So I'd like to see, because I do think that in the full scoring table is also where you want to make sure that there are sites that are identified as, all 5 stars of our categories that to identify for how well they are for housing. That they aren't identified as top prime. They're not conflicting as top of both categories. Really what I want to make sure is not happening, so we don't put this committee or future boards in an instance where they have these 2 lists and they're a fight will happen over this parcel, and then it'll have to get voted on which fund gets to buy it, so.
Are we planning on registering as a pro-housing community?
Yes, we're actively doing that right now.
Okay, and could you also just clarify the deadline for the grant, the tax ballot that we have to get on here, so people have an understanding of where we are in the discussions, how many more opportunities there will be to comment?
August 4th. So we have we have another, we're hoping to have a draft by the end of the month so that we can schedule public hearings in July, but we have to pass both laws by August 3rd, basically, to get those, to get the ballot measure to the Board of Elections so that it can be on the ballot.
So if that deadline, through this process here, if that deadline is not met, does that mean it could go on the ballot for the following year?
Yes, that would be,
Yeah.
it would get punted another year to that, yeah. Peter, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's important to note that the enabling legislation, the overarching enabling legislation does not allow the use of the funds directly for housing, so that I would just throw that up there to be cautious with including as a scoring criteria, because it might, I'm not saying that shouldn't be a criteria. I just think including that in the document could be confusing, and I would question whether that's appropriate, because it cannot be used for that purpose. So it's
Well,
you know,
negative points.
Yeah, I
They would
think
be
Charlotte
negative
was
points.
suggesting that
It would
there be.
minus points from their score.
What's that?
What I'm suggesting is it would be negative points on the scoring for if it was all five, our highest marked. Potential for housing development parcels, they would have negative scoring to minus from their scores on.
Okay, I'm just
just
I'm
to
just raising up
clarify,
the
yeah.
point that adding that criteria into this, just to be aware of the enabling legislation for this. So.
Yes.
The question about how this relates to the comprehensive plan and to housing is an interesting one. So historically, this idea of community preservation plans and a property tax increment to support it goes back to efforts on Long Island that were kind of at the peak, not the peak, but during a time in which environmental conservation and to some extent farmland conservation was front of mind. The housing crisis was not front of mind back then. And when there's been parallel development subsequently to allow for community housing plans, the present legislation has identified those plans to be essentially amendments to the comprehensive plan. So in terms of how to deal with this in this document, one thought I had was like, you have two ways of dealing with this. One is kind of like as an overarching, so for instance, you could say to the maximum extent possible, the community preservation plan shall be implemented in a manner consistent with our comprehensive plan, in particular noting the need for affordable housing, period. So that's just out there and it's high level language. Another way of doing it would be to include something in the scoring. But I think Peter's concerns are legitimate here because there are only, the state legislation says you can have this fund, you can raise these taxes, but it has to be limited to preserving community character. And that term, preserving community character, itself is defined with some strict criteria. So, I don't know if, anybody in Albany is gonna get, all upset to the extent that you veer from that. But anyway, I think it's something that the board could consider on how they might reflect it both on the macro level as kind of, this is a principle we're following here. We don't want to make the housing situation worse. We want to make it better whenever we possibly can. And then, when different proposals come up, it can be looked at through that prism.
Not just people in all, it's anybody who wants to sue the town.
Yeah, it's true. Thank you. Good point. Yeah.
So another really, I thought, a little different topic, really interesting, I thought, suggested edit was by our Agricultural Advisory Committee, which was to use different photos that represent farming to reflect working farms rather than scenic viewshed farms. I thought that was an excellent. So just along that, are there other thoughts about that or other thoughts about how to. Like, that's one way of kind of, I would say, passively dealing with the conflict of that we were talking about, is like over competing priorities, that if we're showing the type of farms that we're wanting to preserve, that somehow speaks to or values that.
I want a hay wagon on 209.
I would say the mix, because that view shed is treasure. And those farms that, you know, they'll just have cows or something out in the middle of it all, it's wonderful. But I think a mix, I think you're right, that you really have to show these are working farms, that this person providing us hay, this is vegetables, this is an orchard. You know, I think you're right, but I wouldn't make it all that, and that's my. If we get too granular now, then that hamstrings you guys for doing the rewrites that have to follow legal specifics, you know, and, you know, so I don't wanna hamstring you guys.
Yeah, I liked the idea of swapping out some of the farm photos with some of the suggested photos for that reason, because it's like, you know.
It's easy to do.
Yeah.
Get the camera, Peter.
I know a guy.
Well, no, we got photos that they gave us permission to too from our committee, so yeah. Any other thoughts on how to deal with, how are we framing it? Where there's overlap of,
Say tension.
tension over competing priorities. Did you have any other major topics?
On the spot.
One thing that I wanted to bring up that you brought up to me one-on-one, which is in the first page, it talks about our increase in population. And we have had a stagnant population. So I was thinking about how to reframe that.
Do you remember the fun fact that Adam Blash gave us?
Yes.
That,
Households.
yeah, so the population's stagnant, but the households are diverging, so that you have the parents staying in a house and then their adult child, they want to stay in the area, they need a house, they're not going to stay in the parents' house. What was the other way?
Well, just just because that the houses are getting the need for
The
a
small
house,
family.
family.
Larger, yes.
Yes.
The smaller the median household family is, so it used to be, I think it was 2.6.
Something like
I
that.
think something like that. It was the mid to high points of 2 was the number in this area of the average household size in the early 2000s censuses, and then now we're at like 2.1 is the average household size. And just because families are getting smaller, that doesn't mean that we need less houses. It actually means we need more houses.
Yeah.
But they need to be smaller.
But they need to be smaller starter homes opposed to multiple generation ones. Large $1 million homes that are matte black with large windows. It needs to be multiple price points also that aren't, you know, that are less than 50% of the median sale price for our homes. So it turns it into, I think it was
300 additional units needed over the
Yes.
course of the last 5
years, yeah, with the analysis. I know it was 300 change, is what we needed to increase our housing
Without
as-
population.
without any changes to our population, to the family makeups of anywhere for children, seniors, adults. And we haven't had any of that. 25% of our housing is dilapidated and vacant because it's condemned or out of use. There was something else I wanted to say about what Adam said for what you meant to call it. Can you repeat your question?
So I guess, yeah, what I was thinking more is like, how do we, in the community preservation plan, how do we frame that pressure? Because there is pressure, but the pressure is actually these homes on large acreage that we do have a pressure, but it's not a population pressure.
No, it's so it's a migration pressure. In the past, we had the most, our town, we had the most people not only moved in, but also moved out of it outside of one really tiny county. Was it inland? Was it Iowa? I get confused once we get.
Yeah.
Doesn't the town have,
Yeah.
I thought we had adopted an accessory use, an accessory dwelling plan where you could have mother-daughter houses pretty more easily than you could in the Am I right about that?
Yes.
Yeah, so that keeps the infrastructure in place where a house might have a couple and 4 kids, now it might have grandma and, you know, and you're not having to do new septic systems and new wells, and all that stuff, so you're not impacting the farm things. What your original question was, how do you address the word, and the word is stable, you have a stable population rather than an increase in population. You know,
But it's not, it's mobile, there's
Yeah.
been as many in as there's been out, we're down to the amount of, was it 10 or 20 years that they've lived here since, I can't remember, it's either 10 years. From the census, from the data we got from Patterns for Progress, 50% of this area, it was either 10 years or 20 years, I can't remember what the time point was, but 50% did not live here 10 years ago. Meaning that people who have lived here for more than 10 years and people who have moved in the last 10 years are equal in our town. So there has been a huge cultural and economic and different shifts that, yes, there's some developmental changes that have happened with the, you know, certain types of certain price point of homes being built, but there was also a huge actual personality and cultural shift that happened. I can go over this too, that caused that, what we're trying to describe, because it's not that we've had a change in population, but our median household income is $85,000 a year, and I don't know anyone who makes that by themselves. And I've grown up here my whole life.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the median, that's the middle, you know, middle, I know that the median is different, I mean, average. But same with our household sale value, it's this year's $557,000, so it's like a shift that has happened in town, even though the number has stayed the same. The money that people have that have come in or have left is different, things like that, so it's changed our demographics.
And so I guess the reason why I brought it up is because in the very first page, it gives the population increase as a reason to adopt a community preservation plan. And I thought it would be good for us to reframe that of like, there is something, there is a pressure, but we actually would like to see a population increase. It's just, we want to see it in the right places. And we want to keep people here too, because that is actually good for the town. It's for people to stay. So I just was thinking about, I think in a few sentences, we could sort of correct that and make it more reflective of what that pressure is. And I think that was why I brought it up, just because it's a reason to do this on that first page.
Isn't that part of community character? Like, I just wondered about the term community character and what that includes, because that was just used.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Does that mean like that everybody who wants to live here is able to? Is that part of community character, or is that something like something else that you're thinking of? Like the preserving part component of it is, and the farmland is, what part of it? What makes community character? I just am asking, and I just wondered how many times is that mentioned in the document? And I just looked that up. It's the collective impression of a neighborhood or town makes on the residents and visitors. They choose the places they live to spend their leisure time on their perceptions of community character. It's the distinct identity of place. So what is that place?
45 times.
Yeah,
But I think we all have a different idea of what community character is, I think. I don't know if it's like
Well, I think the residents are important, right? If people are born and raised here and can't afford to stay here, that's a problem, and I think the document needs to make mention of that. You know, that, to me, the goal of the document is not for the town to buy land and then transfer it, you know, to be forever wild exclusively. That's not, like, locking up land exclusively for preservation is not what I think anyone in the town really wants. We need that balance between having land conserved, and there's reference to this, I think it's like 16,000 acres are already preserved in town, so we need to be mindful of that. Maybe what we want to focus on is farmland, or, you know, preserving land, buying development rights so that we can have more housing in certain areas. And I think it's important that the document emphasizes that this is not just exclusively to preserve viewshed.
Or our town planner pointed out that, and I need to double check this, but he said something about the low well yield districts not really being mentioned. That's another opportunity that we could call out. Because that's what you were saying, you've been hearing a lot. And I agree, I hear a lot about that too. I live in one, so.
Do we know if we're able to use funding to secure land for water and septic infrastructure to
That's what exactly.
preserve our?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, we'll have to look into it.
Has there ever been like the idea of a water district for our court, like in council?
Yes,
It's just a lot
it's
better.
Yeah.
it would be very challenging here in this but like we could have water here probably, but not water and sewer together.
I see.
I have a question that I think I should have asked a while ago now. It's not clear to me who the audience is for this document. Like, it's supposed to be this guiding document for the committee, but it seems to be serving multiple purposes. So who are we trying to inform / convince?
Can I take a shot at that?
I think that's-
Just wearing a legal hat here. My part-time job, I'm a lawyer, but this document is part of a proposal that would go to the whole town. So in a sense, the audience is the town in the first instance. Is you are volunteering in a sense that in the future, should you sell your property, there will be a tax, and we can argue over whether or not the tax is paid by the buyer or the seller, but there will be a tax. And so the first thing is to convince the local residents that this is a plan that is gonna be a foundation for a tax that's gonna be levied. And then the second part of it, which I think has been identified, it's a living document, because it's what's gonna be the touchstone of how those monies will be spent. So there's gonna be an advisory board that's gonna recommend to the town board certain expenditure, right, again? So it's kind of like, you know, it's the citizenry of the town, and then it has to comply with legal requirements.
Taxation with representation.
Yes. Don't throw the tomatoes in the round out.
Although we don't have to argue about it, it's paid
Yeah.
by the buyer.
No,
Yes.
if they
Well, it's set up to pay by the buyer.
no, don't even
It's
say
set-
that,
no,
because
we're not.
if they can't, then the seller pays it.
Yeah,
Somebody pays it.
I don't.
Yes.
I thank you so much. I have to excuse myself, but I really, this has been a vibrant conversation. I'm really happy to be part of it.
Thanks for joining us, Deb. So, yeah, go ahead. We were going on 8:15, so I just wanted to see if anyone here had anything closing, then I thought the board could talk about next steps in terms of making those edits. And you guys are welcome to stick around and give us input on that, but just before we move on to talking about our next steps, I just wanted to open it up and see if anyone had anything else on their head that you just like really wanted to share.
Is there a way to see the comments that people have submitted?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's come, whether you were here for a committee or not, or your committee had more than one person, or you're just here from the public, just thank you. Having more and more of these open discussions is really what I'm hoping for future with more of our town decisions like this. So I just appreciate all of you taking the time to be here on a Monday night at the less than a week's notice, so appreciate it.
Is there a way?
Just one short thing, when we were talking in the housing committee about the exemption, so the property sales below the median are exempted from the tax. Right, which is a good thing, but other communities in doing the parallel thing on the housing have said, well, you don't really need to do that exemption if you're selling a home for $2 million. Maybe the 1% is not gonna either influence the sale or you don't need it as much. So I don't know if that was on your agenda, but if they're cutting back from 2% to 1%. I don't know if it's allowed under the state, I'll look at it, but if it was allowed, it might be something to consider.
It has to be the median.
It has to be,
We get a much cooler way to do our tax. That's way with less restrictions for houses.
For the community preservation, it's very specific about what can be taxed.
what can be exempted.
Yeah, sorry,
Sorry,
what's exempted, it's a whole list and it's, in
Yeah.
a- yeah.
I don't think we get to choose or add.
Any other, yes?
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you.
I just.
Sure.
I wonder,
So,
is there an easy way if people want to provide feedback to the board? Identify it all, subject line, feedback, CPP or something, so if there are specific edits people want to make.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think just put suggested edits and you can email me if there's any of that.
What is the deadline for that?
I would say by Tuesday, the 24th. Ideally by the Sunday, though.
Maybe we could email the committees again.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. Thanks, Alexis. Okay, so we're gonna take a brief 2-minute break. And then we're gonna talk about our next steps, and then we have one other agenda item related to the community fund, or, actually, so.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
We are still streaming.
We're still streaming.
So your conversation. Broadcast.
Hi, Holly. Oh, did you? How's Sully doing? Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
One day.
Yeah, we're excited to see you. That's all.
Yeah.
So it might be that. I'm so happy.
Do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very good.
This is the way things go. But this kind of is written as if they were assuming.
So that's also
what the current-
by,
in the
there's a
current-
Girl Scout.
So if we had, we would have had.
My son.
No. Create such a sort of impose up to.
Yeah.
They would give.
No.
it to us.
The scout.
Yeah, yeah.
They gotta file the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they come, it's like
It's far enough away.
Well, if it's, yeah, I mean, right, so you'd have to.
You know, it's a lot.
Okay, I see. This is.
I think.
I'm curious, like, what your view is on.
What
That's my idea.
What there is to
area?
do.
Yeah, like, how are you gonna vote?
For this.
Can go back to Ted.
Which I guess
Oh, she's preparing for the next steps for them when they're ready in January.
Or they could adopt the resolution.
They're still, no, I think.
No, the town could.
Oh, okay, yes, yes, they can jump on that, right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, about just letting him know what.
They need to do that next.
I don't think that's.
Before they could go to this.
Well, that just means that next year they'll have to get reintroduced.
Solutions like.
But they're all prepared, it's made up.
This would help you with them.
Right.
Although.
Yeah, sure, that was in that.
Like that, having a model,
Oh, really?
I think.
Yeah, that's in the past.
Also,
Well, of course, unless the assumption is that next year, Edie's.
I
building
said
will be
twice outside,
introduced.
so I wanted to say it too. Thank you for really setting the stage for this tonight and like really explaining that this really, there's such a breath of
So it
air.
will be, will be.
Past like 18,
in a
19
sense,
months, how much I've seen the town can transform.
properly
So much
reflect
more like,
the
they
state.
feel like inclusive and so. I said it twice, and someone's like, you should just go tell Aaron.
Oh.
Okay, wait, hold on, let me go tell her.
well, and
Thank you,
I
it's-
thank you both
In the
for all the
event.
work you did, and I know that I did not necessarily commit that whole thing. The best thing,
Usually it's-
I was.
I
but like, also, I'm glad that we can come together. and-
Oh, but you set the stage where it's so beautiful. Doing because, you know, this is, it's a living document, it's all really, so this is one of the.
I ran into.
I'm gonna back away before I get stuck in here.
I love it. We're doing here.
I love. Plans. That's how I got interested in. They're trying to put the gas.
You know, because we had.
One thing I could not do.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Yeah.
I've been there for a whole
We could call
different-
her.
Yeah, no, I'm urban.
So very.
Yeah, I don't really know.
There for family.
I just don't lose the house.
One of the. I was like, I can ask one.
No, I think he has
Yes, no.
specific notes that he's wanting to-
Okay.
You have the bathroom for us?
We can watch, we're up on good. That's where you're going over to watch?
Yeah.
Not your birthday.
Thank you for doing this, yeah. Maybe the thing to do.
So when you were talking to Peter, you said you could do it two way, like there's two ways to visit. The word,
As a.
the word affordable housing. To be in that.
Like, yeah.
We're combo both.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just have the same, I think some of the.
Is everybody, you guys gonna vote?
What if, we should probably post it as a red line.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll try.
Yeah.
I might have to do just the pages.
Yeah.
Or take all the pages out.
Yeah, the converted Word
He
document.
sent Michael all that stuff, so.
Yeah.
We have all those.
Yeah, I'll just, you could probably do it very efficiently.
Okay.
But.
Yeah, no, it's called One Boss is Susan Baldwin, she was the founder of the home share program.
Yeah, I know she is. Family.
I got it. That's the version I have, and I posted it.
I know.
And we have to think wrong about it, so. The town is done for the moment.
So really, like when I was just. Email, like I was just saying.
Mention that afterwards.
Wait, I'm sorry, and I was just like, she was like.
Which is
to the
great.
floor,
We get
and I was
facts.
like, yeah, you introduced her Bill, and she was like.
Yeah, no.
Who's your
Makes sense,
son?
right?
What she.
I think you guys feel
I was
that.
like.
Wasn't happy. Wasn't happy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. You should watch the,
Well, this talk-
were you at Eagle House?
She's off the step of.
Okay, that presentation that Adam from Patterns of Practice. Oh, you couldn't find it?
I couldn't find it.
She was gonna help Woodstock.
Oh, okay. I'll add it to, there's a middle category that, I'll send you a link.
Okay, that'd be great. yeah.
But the first one he did an hour.
Yeah, that might be.
And it goes in depth as on this topic and why we want, it's, I learned so much.
That's the one I see, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
That'd be awesome.
okay, yeah, I'll email that.
Thank you, guys.
We're still speaking.
We're still speaking, yeah.
You want to speak?
Yeah, we're gonna pass a resolution and we're gonna end it.
All right. Oh, that's right.
Or hope, maybe, you guys.
You can see what.
Then we'll figure out our next steps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But when you were saying that either, you said you could do two, like you were responding
Yeah.
to, and you were saying that because of the language wouldn't be good to have affordable housing in there, and the other choice that you said there's another choice. Okay.
I mean, I think you can mention it. I think you can.
Was I at? Oh, yeah, totally. I was RFK.
You were? Okay, I thought.
This means I think.
You're in disguise, huh?
You are still speaking.
So I just wanted to understand that you mentioned community character, which made me think of it for character. So that.
Right, which is.
So we're. Some of this.
You're too big, that file is like so big.
Define community.
Remember how some people didn't download for them properly?
Yeah, like the copy I have,
I would think community character.
the pictures are all low res on.
Yeah.
The lifestyle that people were.
I think we can probably fix with the published version so that.
Well, you should be able to compress the picture.
Could they
Yeah.
describe it in there?
My favorite thing at work is, the PowerPoint template they use is like 70 megs.
Oh, really?
And like, so you can have one slide in it and it's still 70 megs. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, these legacy, like I'm always doing that, going through like emails from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah.
This was the.
Oh.
After I started.
What?
I want writing down.
I needed somebody.
Oh. Okay, so we're back, much smaller group. Okay, so hit me with your ideas. How are we gonna make these before?
So kind of incorporate what David was saying, and also what the environmental committees were saying. Is there some way to talk about flood mitigation as part of the scoring rubric, or water? How do we kind of include that beyond what's already in there?
Well,
You can add a score.
water's in it, so.
Yeah, but I mean like water, but too much, not enough. I mean, like, what are the most difficult climate challenges that we have? Probably flooding.
At my house, yes.
Yeah.
That also, but that's true.
Well,
I'm curious to see his. Feedback specific to water.
who?
From David. Church.
Oh, Dave Church, yeah, he's gonna draft some stuff for us. He just couldn't come tonight, but he offered to draft language. So I was gonna ask him about that specifically, so I could have him do that and then circulate that.
Yeah.
It's in the scoring.
It is in the
It's in
scoring.
the scoring, they just, it would be the ladder of what you're asking, like wetlands and the flood zones are in there for scoring categories. It would look like once, like just drier.
Yeah.
Is like low yield. That's
Somebody
what
to
I'm not
reflect
seeing
both,
yet.
both sides. of it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I hope it- Yeah, I don't, in the water, I don't see it in any other towns, so I don't see it low yield, but.
It's the low well yield is not in there, so
Yes.
I think I don't know that we can. I don't know that it's possible for us to redo any of the actual mapping. Because I think I have the data files for the low well yield district from 2008.
Yeah.
Um,
But maybe not for this go around, but when I was talking to the grant consultants, there's like a lot of money for flood mitigation and water table research. I think that'd be like a really easy get for us going forward.
Yeah.
We could incorporate things like that going forward.
I can also,
Revise it and have it
Yeah.
future date, like the delayed.
I also, for, I have the flood, the whole thing is Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
so if there's anything that comes out of that, that I think could help in just in some of the language in the plan document.
Yeah.
Cause that's easy enough. It's based on FEMA.
Yeah.
It's not called FEMA.
Yeah, we can also. We can also make reference to the low well yield map in the document itself to say, you know, this should be factored into future decisions, or this should be consulted
Mhm.
before decisions are made. About
Yeah.
specific things,
Without
changing the scoring.
Right. Okay.
How do we feel about logging being in there like at all? I just thought it was kind
Forgot to
of
mention that, because.
strange. Bedfellow.
Something. On the last scene. That something's really mentioned that was from the seventies.
Right.
I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with logging if it's. Tree farming, like logging, like it's, you know, logging old growth forest, which I think would be different than. You know, raising a tree stand, logging it 20-30 years down the road. I mean, I think that could be a good use of, you know, a good farming use to have in there. But we may want to specify logging, you know, I don't even know what the proper terminology is, but.
Yeah, like not take, responsible, like land management.
Right.
Like logging, not just to strip mine entire fields.
Right.
Type of logging.
And I think, you know, a lot of the heavily wooded areas are already in some form of easement, they're part of their state.
Well, and I think this document is identifying logging as community character.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at.
And I will say, like, one of the things I'm learning that I learned from the short meeting I had with the Michael Gage, who's doing the inventory, is that a lot of our spaces are like new growth.
Yeah.
And so I think that is something to take in consideration, that like there is a way to do it responsibly, and it is like part of our
As it is part of our community,
Yeah.
Most of our local landscapers are loggers in the fall. Once there's not lawns to mow and, you know, things to weed whack, they turn into loggers and they sell.
Well, tree management, yes. It's not exactly the same thing as tree farming. But
Yeah, but logging isn't tree farming.
what's that?
Logging isn't tree farming.
No, but there's different types of logging.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It was like the logging that we have in town, though, that's.
Right, there's no strip mine. It's just,
Yeah, it's not.
yeah, I just think like we could massage language a little bit. You know,
So-
arbor management or something like that.
So what's the suggestion you're making for the edit?
No, they just in terms of like arbor management is maybe better than just logging, because it just, conveys this idea that everybody's done that with strip mining forests.
It's the chapter in our zoning code, so I don't think we can change the title of the chapter that they're referencing.
Yeah, that section is just summarizing chapters of code, which that's defined in our code as
Okay,
well.
I'll put that on for the comprehensive plan overview then.
Yeah, I was gonna say that can be in like the zoning chapter. We can make that.
All right, is there anything else like environmental mitigation that pops up as important?
Well, I think it's, I don't know how to include climate change more,
Yeah.
like just the concept. I think this document is robust enough, but I think it sounded like there was a request to think about ways that we could highlight that more.
I mean, we could put more emphasis on preserving woodland areas, connecting migration corridors,
Right.
things like that. Or,
And floodplain management.
yeah,
Okay.
In terms of process, to me, the easiest thing. I don't want to be a broken record. We put it up. SharePoint. And we can all make comments in the same document and it'll track. Whose comments are what, and then we can review them. And have that version available publicly.
Yeah, I was reading.
Instead of everybody makes individual comments.
I don't think everyone should make individual comments. I also don't know how without, I don't know what we need is, we need to somewhat agree what edits we want to try to commit to. And then I think someone or someones should make those edits and present that draft. Because I think if we have a draft that's multiple ideas, I don't know how we're gonna have something that we can schedule a public hearing on.
Yeah.
So I thought we should maybe high level talk about what do we want to see, try to include, and then talk about. Like I have time this weekend if like. You guys either like one other board member, like we could just sit down and put together. Anything that's been emailed to us, anything that we talked about today, and then try to get a draft out on Sunday evening. So that
I agree to do it from my pool on Sunday morning. Come over, we'll have coffee in the pool, it's heated.
I don't think we're gonna need it to be heated this weekend.
I know it's nice.
Just gonna talk.
Yeah,
I'm happy to do it. No.
I'm also willing to. Workshop stuff.
My edits are mostly for the resolution, based off of the suggestions I got from council for my wanting to just kind of give a blanketed thing instead of trying to tweak all the language within this to.
Which resolution?
To the resolution where we approve sending this.
Not the
after
housing
public-
resolution?
No, I'm
Yeah.
talking about the CPP. That was what I was asking at the last meeting when Mary Lou said you shouldn't put anything specific. Restriction, like we can't put an intent or restriction on a future board. And that's what it would be inside the law, but we can put the intent of it in the resolution. So that's why I was saying the intent of having. Making sure that any of the sites identified in the housing plan are not. Also, like they have points minus from them if they go from.
Like we set a priority as a
We set a
board.
priority, like showing them we set a priority that affordable housing, that this doesn't take precedent over the possibility for a parcel for housing. Is really, that's what I kind of came down to the, kind of like what I really liked that example where they're using like open space preservation and farming preservation, like, yeah, you can take an active farm and make it open space and just stop using it and it's preserved.
Okay, as long as we're not ranking priorities. I think that's be super divisive. You say you want to be inclusive of priorities without ranking them.
No, I don't think we're giving like a. I'm talking about their scoring ranking in this document, not like us.
The ranking of individual
The
parcels.
ranking of individual parcels, so like if they have a parcel that say 10's the maximum points they can get, that's 10 and. The future committee goes to look at that parcel to potentially buy it to preserve it, but it's in the housing document as. The top 5 or top 3 parcels identified. That they can't, that the CPP shouldn't take precedent over the housing.
Are those
If they're both.
parcels already identified?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
and how many, what percentage of of all the parcels are in that document?
I don't know off the top of my head, I can try to see what the numbers were for each of them.
Okay, because we don't want to end up with a boondoggle where it's like both of them have like 100%.
Oh, no,
It's not,
no,
there's just very
they're-
few parcels that
Not
are suitable
that are suitable for housing.
for.
Well,
this
I mean, yeah,
kind of
that's,
clustered.
I remember that discussion. So it's a discussion from the corridors that you guys identified.
Yes, yeah, from the most, the highest marked of the most developable parcels.
So
I
we're
don't want-
100% taking them out of consideration for these
We can't, so.
Yeah,
so-
I'm saying that they should have, that there should be a deterrent on those
Okay.
properties if they are only if they're on this list of the housing identified properties for development, for cluster development. things.
So what this, I mean, this document is a guiding document. The way the committee did it is it names every single parcel in town, I think.
Minus the ones that already has.
Minus the ones that already, so I think it's one thing I think that I would like us to try to do with edits is not, I think it would be too much to add a scoring criteria or to edit the scoring, like we can't achieve that right now. I think we leave that just a future review, but I think we can frame the priorities for the first 5 years. And it's not gonna, everything is just dependent upon what is offered to the town. I mean, I don't think that we're gonna have like so much to choose from. It's so much about like who a willing seller is coming to the town with something, or us maybe knowing about an opportunity where we could go to a landowner and say, hey, we can offer you something. And I think it's just our job is to create some priorities, and we don't want to create hard and fast priorities because then we might not be able to do anything at all. But I think I like the idea of acknowledging our comprehensive plan and the balance of trying to get back to being a more affordable place to live, but also recognizing that we don't want to sacrifice our identity as a rural farming community to that end. So that's the way I think we can add some language where we're, setting those priorities. So I think it sounds like we're all aligned in that, and you wanna, for the resolution where we adopt the local law, you wanna add some kind of commitment language for this board.
Yeah, because just my only concern is this, and wanting to put that language in there is that as far as being on the ballot and establishing these funds, conservation already has become a priority over housing, just by the dates of how everything fell. And I don't, that as a board, the board has established that housing has been an issue for 30 years. It was in the comprehensive plan, listed dozens of times, so I just want to make sure that in the future that it's clear that these are what the goals are and the priorities for things. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I just want to make sure that because conservation is getting the foot through the door in the upper hand in this realm of transfer taxes, that housing does not get slipped under.
No, I think housing deserves its own document like this.
No.
Housing deserves this entire treatment.
That's not what I'm saying, though. Because we missed the deadline for the bill last week, we don't have a chance for it to be on the ballot this year. So I'm saying no matter what, it's already an inequal from them not being on the same year and going in the same year. So I'm just trying to make sure that there's that year while this is established, while we are trying to get the housing one established, that there's not.
What's the timeline for getting us, because as from what I understand, we just have to get some documentation together and just put, a resolution together for our pro-housing commitment, right?
So let's just focus, can we just, I
That's
think
separate.
we can
So-
talk about that in a second. Okay, so I think I'm not worried about including some language about housing. I'm not concerned about that. I feel with my own abilities, I feel like we're all okay with that. I think we can add some language. So I just want to list off the edits and if any of you disagree with an effort to these edits, please say something. So housing, and then we want to, a suggestion was made for the historic preservation of community character, that we figure out what documentation was cited in this plan that listed 500 properties, because it doesn't align with what the HPC knows. So we can double check that citation. And then they would like there to be more mention of like the farming identity, and perhaps as part of the preservation, mentioning a value to like the full community. So like we have a lot of we've had a lot of migration, but also recognizing people who have been here. I think that was about the farming affordability. So I think it was about generational farming, new farming, but mostly their feedback was about this citation. ECC didn't have any suggested edits. From the planning board side, what I heard was looking at the availability of water, which we talked about. And then also, they also said they think we need to recognize housing somehow. Ag had lots of really good stuff, the photos, I mean, done as far as I'm concerned. They want to make sure that we have some language about farmland not being in competition with parks. I think we can do that easily without sacrificing any future opportunity. And they had some really specific edits in their feedback. And then the other, I highlighted things that I thought. Then the edits of the frame of the rising population, I think we need to just correct that. And then, Michael, you want to kind of take out increase of property value as a goal.
I want to make sure we have the parks edit.
Yes, Manuela's parks edit, yep. And to maybe for cluster development, have some more on how because conservation subdivision is mentioned a lot, but show how it a little bit more. I think this is a huge opportunity on the topic we were just talking about, where we can actually call out the opportunity to have these two values work together. And then I think this is taken care of, but there was a mention about thinking about soil types. I'll look at it again. I'm pretty sure that's
There was soil type grading.
the scoring criteria. Okay. So that was basically I'm just looking through my notes. Okay. So that was basically it. So one suggestion I have is I can send out an email, but any kind of more like specific thoughts you have of edits, you can be sent to me. And then I and whoever, I can schedule it, we can sit down and just sort of like workshop those edits. Peter said that he thinks that Ted Fink might also be available to help with the edits very quickly because he's reached out to him.
Oh, sure.
So that's another thing I could do. I could just work with Ted potentially. We do have a little bit of funding available in that budget line because I anticipated that we might want to have him help us with edits. Well, we can, so any thoughts on how we want to pull this together? Or do you just want to do it?
I mean, I think we should work on it as some combination board. Like, I don't know that we need to go to a consultant based off the feedback we have to do that. So that would be my preference, is we just figure out
So can you just give me something concrete to go off of? Like, what's your proposal?
Meet individually in groups of two, if I'm happy to do it. If you want to meet independently with Charlotte or Alexis and work on things, we can do that.
So you want two sets of board members to work on the same thing and then what?
If two or three of us want to work on it, then I think that's fine. But I think we should have one document that we can then review as a board. Say these are all the
When?
changes.
Next week? We have to have the
All right,
document.
I'm gonna counter, I made a motion for me and you to schedule a time to meet on Sunday, and we will make the edits. in The SharePoint on file, make the red line that we can all review together at the next meeting before we publish.
We can review it at the workshop.
We have to have it, so it has to be a printed document. We have to have the document in front of us when we schedule the public hearing. So we can make a couple edits as long as everybody makes the same edits and has it in front of them.
That's what I'm saying, Michael, you already marked your edits?
Some of them, but some of them were just comments. They weren't actual edits. They were-
Alexis, do you have any particular like word for word edits that you want to do specifically in
No,
there?
mostly just some citations and the introductory things. Like, I think we should, if we're gonna like talk about population, we need to have updated.
Yeah, the
citations.
numbers, yeah, those
Yeah.
things. Mhm, I agree, okay.
And then also, there's just also some ideas about examples of characteristics and how we could identify that visually. Or just like a vignette of something that we're talking about, especially if we plan on this being a publicly digestible document.
Do you have any, did you have any other specific suggestions besides the photos, like vignettes?
I mean, I think like if we are talking about. Prioritizing housing is like, what does it look like? What does a developed housing look like in
Yeah.
our community characteristic, for example?
Mhm.
Like, what does it look like? And
Sage.
where, like, what are the resources that, you know, where would you put, like, I don't know, that's just what I'm thinking. What can we say?
Okay.
I like the idea of making samples.
I think what everybody wants to know is what are we going to do with this money? That's
Yes.
literally what
Yeah,
everybody
I know,
wants
that
to
is
know.
exactly what I want to answer a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I was at too, and I was trying to figure out that, so. I wanted the same thing with more answers of the actual post collecting answers for people, so. I'll look at that site, because that's. So yeah, I think me and you can meet. Michael, you just keep typing your things in SharePoint. Alexis, do you wanna give us just like a couple, like maybe bullet?
Unless you feel comfortable with
what we.
I think what,
I mean, just the important, like, the thing to me is I don't want priorities like ranked. I think that's gonna be really divisive if we put it forward like that, and. I'm bringing that up just because of something you said the last meeting where you said housing is the number one most bleeding important priority. And I think even if, like, we can argue about whether or not that's true, but I don't think like this is the document to put it in those terms. If that makes sense, and that was something like the committees were kind of a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't mean that for the exact verbiage, but I agree with you. I'm directly affected by the housing crisis.
Yeah.
And so, and I have been my entire life in this town, it's something that's close to home. But I also, like I said, there's a housing crisis, not a conservation crisis.
I do want to say one thing about like generational housing. It does change intergenerationally because previously you would have 3 or 4 generations in a house and now everybody wants their own house.
yes.
So that is a change,
It is a change.
even within the same family, the same household. So I think it's important to recognize community character, but it's also evolving. And those
Yeah.
values are evolving and we need to reflect that.
I think that's why I brought up the population
Yeah.
thing. Well, Michael brought it up to me first, but because that is exactly part of what it is the smaller household, and that's one of the reasons. And so I think, yeah, I agree. I think we want to see we've been engaging with the town a little bit more than we have in years past. I mean, we still have a long way to go, but I think we're hearing these things that we're hearing. We want to make sure that we're including and it's reframing. So, okay, so we're
So
gonna,
for a vignette, for example,
Yeah.
you could say, okay, use cases for this funding, then you talk about, you know, fourth generation farmer, but they have X number of acreage, but they want to like subdivide out same sewage line and they put the in-law unit, or example. And you know, just like what is a use case that we would consider like an ideal use for this, for money, right?
Mhm.
And then, you know, also there's conserving like property for farming, right? So what does it actually look like? What is the reason that we're putting housing in here? What are some specific use cases that would result from putting housing in the scoring rubric, for example? I think that's the question I definitely have.
What I pointed out before, so that a parcel of the very little that we have that are marked with 5 stars of all the categories, that they meet all the categories that our consultant looked at each corridor and parcels with. So there's very few compared to a map of the entire town with the priorities, with none being scored 0 for any parcel, for not being able to be conserved. And we have tons that were scored at 0 for housing, and so to have a parcel that could potentially add housing that's desperately needed here, taken off of the market and out of it, it's in the law of this fund, you cannot use it for housing whatsoever, the property's bought with this funding. That completely takes it off the table for any possibility for housing. And
So it sounds like
very
what we're talking about is guidance to say, if there's 2 equal parcels that are both 10s. And one is identified as potentially usable for housing and the other is not, then the future committee would say, okay, well, we shouldn't vote to preserve something that could be used for housing. We should concentrate on the one that's equal but not suitable for housing. Maybe it's a parcel that's, you know, bordering the Catskills or the Gulls.
I think I understand the tension, I understand the, and I also understand the goals. So I think we can all think about this, but I think that I don't have it specifically, but I think there's a solution to this. And, I don't think we can really do anything with the scoring table, but I think we can have the guiding language. And just kind of like knowing that there's nothing we can do, we can't like restrict anything, but I think we just wanna make sure that we acknowledge like the priorities and also like this might you know, as a appendix to maybe illustrate some of the models that are happening right now where, you know, if we have both funds and someone comes to the town, that's when we have the biggest power. Because
with both funds, there's an issue. It's the
Yeah.
fact that there's not both
Right.
on the ballot.
And also, we should know, just also one thing is, and we won't get any money until, so this starts if this passes, no money will come, no sales count until February. So, we're not gonna be in a position to really do anything, you know. The same.
People can donate to this fund, Aaron.
They
That
can.
only come from taxes. Someone could donate $1 million if they wanted to and tell us to preserve whatever parcel we want. And then demand and have the whole turnout come here and convince the board to do it. That's why I want protections in there, because yes, we've seen people with a lot of money buy a lot of parcels that are favoring each other in town this few years, so.
Understood. Okay, so I heard you saying you want to be involved in editing. We can work that out, but let's try to get something kind of that's solid by Sunday evening or Monday evening and then we'll try to have a cover sheet that has all the edits listed so that it makes it easy for everybody to like look at those. And then if we do make any edits we are all able to like make those with the document in front of us, okay? So I think it'd be good to move on, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, so just on the same topic, as I told you guys, we, go ahead.
Similar time.
So yeah, similar topic, sorry. I was advised by Senator Oberocker's aide to try to, and she encouraged me to try to get the board to pass a resolution and enable the Home Rule Authority form to be sent to them this month. So everything that I saw, we just have to pass a resolution requesting that this happen. And the Home Rule Authority form names the Senate bill number, which I put at the bottom of the draft I just handed to you guys. And then it just asks for the number and the name of it. So me filling it out is like just gonna be putting that information into the form. So this was in the agenda that I sent you guys last night, but I made a couple of edits, just that was a typo. So yeah, that's not the right state law. And there isn't a specific one that like allows us to do this. It's just like, we can do this if we get the legislation. And then the other thing I wasn't sure about, again, didn't have like a ton of guidance on this, but she said if we want the bill to say 1% rather than 0.5%, she said just put that in your resolution. So I'm open, if you guys want to take a look at this and let me know how you would prefer that to be phrased.
I think it looks good. Like that.
Is that legislative session correct?
Which one?
Um,
Yeah,
even though they did it, they introduced it this year.
yeah, they can't vote on it until January.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yep, thank you.
Or we can say, we can just strike that and say and wish and request the enactment during the next session.
Yeah.
Were you guys talking about this at all, or you're doing something else?
No, he's reading what he just
I was just,
Googled it and looked it up, the actual bill.
The Senate bill.
Yeah.
Yes.
did they put the 1% in the Senate bill? This is what I
No,
was just trying to know.
they didn't.
They just went with the Assembly as the same.
Yeah, and she
Okay.
said if
Yeah.
we wanted it, well, I don't think they did.
Well, I'm looking at
You
it.
should do a control F because she said. Actually, that's a good question.
Probably not.
Did it make that bigger? God, it's tiny.
I'm sure they didn't change what came from these.
I'll just put it in quick. 8, 2, 6, 7. Do.
See, 14%.
Bonuses tax, I found it in the last one.
That's different to us.
Yeah. Wait, can we get a vote on that now?
The resolution. That's the plan.
That's the plan. Really doesn't matter whether or not they said it or not, since
You're right. You're right. But I know where it is in the, I can just quickly,
It doesn't matter if they said it or not, because you're gonna make it in the whole rule.
it's at the bottom.
that's what I mean.
Is it raining?
Yeah, I'm at home in the rain.
I think we don't have 1%.
That is one
That
half.
was scary.
Yeah. 1/2, 1%. Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what's
so
in
it was
there.
the same. as-
1/2 of 1%. Okay, good.
Right, but then,
It's a weird way to say that.
sorry,
Yeah, they wrote it in letter form,
I
not.
just said
in number.
1% instead of just 0.5%.
Should we say proposed in the current bill? Like, is,
It's not proposed though, because they passed it, right?
it hasn't been, they can't pass it until we do this.
I would just leave it in the current bill.
Because you're referencing here the
Included in
bill
current bill.
that's introduced this session, right?
I am referencing, yeah, I wasn't, she said, if you want it to be 1%, just put that in your resolution.
Okay.
And so I'm like, do I just put that we want it, that we request it at 1%, not reference the bill, or?
Rather than the proposed 0.5%.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that that's what I would do.
Think
Because
what?
this has no real effect of law. In other words, if there was an existing law that had established 0.5%, and you had to amend that in a sense, or get a way around it, but right now, it's just another proposal, so you don't have to cross-reference it.
So we just should say, requesting the enactment.
Of 1%.
And to
Rather.
impose real estate transfer tax of up to 1%,
Right,
and then just strike.
The rather,
Rather than the current.
Yeah.
Property, yeah.
I think you could put that, if it were me, I would put that in my cover email to say that
Yeah.
our resolution is asking for.
Oh, I have to send 8 certified copies of both documents,
Right,
so.
well,
No
but
email.
just to let the.
Yeah, you're right,
people-
I can let her know.
Um,
They want it mailed and the actual raised
the stamp,
stamp.
yeah, the seal.
cost is like $200 available.
Yeah.
So you don't have to
Representation.
reference this.
No, I think it's good.
percent.
I don't think you have.
Okay.
I make motion. As presented in. That the town of Rockland Town Board authorize.
I guess you could motion.
Did you have one written there?
I think we should just motion to pass the Home Rule Authority request resolution as presented.
Do you know what?
No, this is just for Kate.
So then I motion to approve the Home Rule Authority resolution as presented and amended. And to have the clerk.
Yeah. I have to do it.
And have the supervisor.
You don't have to say it, it's in the resolution.
Okay.
Second,
Here we go.
Okay,
that was a clean resolution.
any discussion?
Most beautiful resolution I've ever done.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion carries. Okay.
Motion in place.
Thank you.
Second, at. 8:59. Good evening. Thanks, guys. Ken,
Thank you.
bill by the quarter hour for your consultations? Thanks, guys.
It's like a plastic bag.
Yes.
Yeah.
I triggered for what, I'm talking about a laptop.
Oh, your laptop. I'm sorry, I felt bad.
All right.
For body part, we have trash bags or